The War Council chamber was a grand place, built of black stone and shining metal. Tall pillars reached the high ceiling, each carved with the history of the alien alliance. Around the long table sat commanders from many worlds, their uniforms decorated with bright badges of honor. Today, they had gathered to choose a leader for the most dangerous mission in the galaxy. At the far end of the hall, the heavy doors opened. Captain Rin Varric, a tall alien officer with silver skin and sharp eyes, stepped forward. Behind him walked a man, a human, Commander Elias Kane. He was not young. His hair was short, streaked with gray, and his body was covered in old battle scars. A deep mark crossed his cheek, another curved along his neck, and his hands were rough from years of holding weapons. His armor was plain and worn, its surface scratched from past battles. The room fell silent for a moment as Kane walked in. Then, the whispers began. "Is this the human they chose? He looks slow. Those scars. How can someone like that lead an important mission?" Some of the alien commanders tried to hide their laughter. Others didn't bother. To them, scars were a sign of weakness, proof that the soldier had failed to avoid injury. Among their people, the best warriors looked untouched, flawless. Kane was the opposite. Captain Varric spoke loudly, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This is Commander Elias Kane of Earth. He has served in more battles than anyone here. He survived the siege of Andara Prime, the fire fields of Yor, and the collapse of the Syndral Spire." Still, the alien leaders were not impressed. Tall, red-scaled general leaned back in his chair. "Survived? That is all? We are looking for someone who wins battles, not just lives through them." Kane stood still. He didn't try to defend himself. His brown eyes moved slowly around the table, meeting the gaze of each commander. There was no anger in his face, only a calm patience, as if he had heard such words many times before. Finally, Admiral Soren, leader of the council, stood and addressed the room. "The mission before us is unlike any other. The Cathar Dominion has built a planetary shield around their fortress world. It has stood for 100 years. No ship can break through. We need someone to go inside and destroy it from the ground." The room grew tense. Everyone knew what that meant. The shield generator was deep inside enemy territory, guarded by thousands of elite soldiers. It was a mission almost certain to fail. The Admiral's voice grew colder. "This is a volunteer mission. Whoever accepts it will take a small team. Travel through hostile space and strike the shield controls. The chance of survival is low." Around the table, eyes shifted nervously. One by one, the commanders looked away. No one spoke. No one wanted to lead a mission that would likely end in death. Then, a voice broke the silence. "I'll go." Every head turned. Kane was standing tall, his voice steady. He didn't look to the council for approval. He simply stated the words as if they were fact. One alien captain scoffed. "You think you can walk into the most secure fortress in the galaxy with a handful of soldiers and succeed?" Kane's answer was short. "I've walked into worse." The laughter returned, but this time it was uneasy. Some of the younger officers glanced at Kane differently now, wondering what he meant. Captain Varric, who had served beside Kane once before, stepped forward. "You may laugh, but I've seen this human fight. Every scar on his body is a story of survival. Battles where others fell, but he stood. He doesn't just survive, he endures. And endurance, more than anything, wins wars." Kane said nothing. He didn't need to. He knew the mission would be hard. He knew the chances were small. But he also knew something the others didn't. He was not afraid of hard paths. The council finally agreed. Whether they believed in him or not, no one else had stepped forward. Kane was given the mission. He was to choose his own team and leave within 2 days. As the meeting ended, the alien commanders left in groups, still talking about the human with scars. Some mocked him, others dismissed him entirely, but one young alien recruit, barely old enough to serve, watched Kane as he left the hall. The recruit had noticed something strange: the human's walk. Kane moved with a quiet confidence, his steps slow and deliberate, like a man who knew exactly where he was going. The recruit whispered to himself, "He's not walking to his death, he's walking to something else." In the long corridor outside, Captain Varric caught up to Kane. "You know they expect you to fail." Kane gave a small, tired smile. "Good. That means they won't see me coming." Varric studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Just remember, you don't have to prove anything to them." Kane's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not proving anything to them. I'm doing this for the ones who can't fight back. That's enough for me." They walked in silence after that. That night, in his quarters, Kane sat at a small desk. He reached for a cup of water, then stopped. His hand rested, instead, on a long scar along his forearm. He remembered the day he got it, left behind on a burning moon, surrounded by enemies, every friend already gone. He had been alone, outnumbered, and bleeding. But he hadn't given up. He never gave up. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the star map glowing on the wall. The fortress world lay at the far edge of the galaxy, a single red dot surrounded by enemy-controlled systems. The journey there would be dangerous. The mission inside would be worse. And yet, as Kane studied it, a strange calm settled over him. He had walked into impossible battles before. He had faced death and returned. He had carried the weight of victory and the pain of loss. And this time, he would do it again. 2 days later, the hangar was alive with the hum of engines and the sharp smell of fuel. Mechanics rushed between ships, tools in hand. Soldiers prepared their gear, checking weapons and armor. In one corner of the massive space stood Commander Elias Kane, studying the sleek, dark transport that would carry his team deep into enemy space. The mission had been explained to him in full. Infiltrate the Cathar Dominion's fortress world, destroy the planetary shield generator, and escape before enemy reinforcements trapped them. No fleet could reach the planet while the shield was active. The success of the war depended on it, and yet no one had volunteered to join him willingly. Kane was given a list of available soldiers, most of them young, untested, or recently assigned to the outer fleets. The experienced warriors had refused, either openly or with polite excuses. To them, it wasn't bravery to go on a mission with no chance of survival. It was foolishness. Captain Rin Varric approached, holding a data pad. "These are the ones assigned to you," he said. "Orders from the Council." Kane looked over the names. 4 aliens and 1 human besides himself. He recognized none of them. "Why these?" Kane asked. Varric gave a small shrug. "They're available." Kane understood the truth. They were sending him those the Council considered expendable. If the mission failed, the loss would be minimal in their eyes. Still, he accepted without complaint. The first to arrive was Jorath, a young alien with green skin and nervous eyes. His armor looked barely used, and he carried his rifle like it was too heavy for him. He saluted awkwardly. "Sir, reporting for duty." Kane nodded. "You know the mission?" Jorath swallowed hard. "Yes, sir, and I'll try not to slow you down." The second was a tall female alien named Serenia, her silver-blue skin reflecting the hangar lights. She was a medic, and her expression was calm, though Kane could see she was studying him carefully. "You've been in many battles," she said, as they shook hands. "A few," Kane replied simply. The next 2 arrived together. Twin brothers from a desert world, both lean and sharp-eyed. Their names were Rhinel and Thorek. They moved with the restless energy of hunters. Kane liked their alertness. Last came Private Daniel Cole, the only other human on the team. Young, with close-cut hair and a determined look, he stood straighter. Then the others. "Sir," Cole said firmly, "I'm ready." Kane studied him for a moment. Cole reminded him of himself many years ago, before the scars, before the long list of battles survived. Later, in the briefing room aboard the transport, Kane stood before his team. A holographic map of the fortress world spun slowly in the air. "This," Kane began, pointing to a large mountain range, "is where we'll land. The fortress is here, built into the cliffs. The shield generator is deep underground. Once we take it out, our fleet can strike." Rhinal frowned. "The mountain passes will be crawling with Cathar patrols." Kane nodded. "Yes. That's why we're not taking the passes." With a press of a button, the map shifted, revealing a narrow canyon. "This is an old service route. It's been abandoned for decades. Most of it runs underground. The enemy won't expect us to use it." Jorath raised his hand hesitantly. "Sir, why would they leave it unguarded? Isn't it a trap?" "Everything is a trap," Kane replied. "The trick is walking into one in a way that makes it yours." The room was quiet for a moment. The recruits exchanged glances. This was not the kind of commander they were used to, one who spoke of danger without fear. That night, Kane sat alone in the ship's small mess hall. The others had gone to rest, but he preferred the silence. He cleaned his rifle slowly, checking every part, the routine calming his mind. He knew what they thought of him, an old soldier, a relic from a rougher time. But he also knew that war was not about looking perfect. It was about surviving long, enough to do what needed to be done. Varric appeared in the doorway. "You've got a strange crew, Kane. You sure you can trust them?" "I don't need to trust them," Kane replied without looking up. "I just need them to follow me for 3 days." Varric leaned against the wall. "And if they don't?" Kane finally looked up, his voice quiet but certain. "They will." The following morning, the mission began. The transport lifted off, its engines humming steadily as it left the safety of Allied space. Through the viewports, the stars stretched into long lines as they entered faster-than-light travel. Inside, the team sat strapped into their seats, weapons secured. The air was tense. No one spoke much. Even the twins, who seemed restless before, now sat in silence. Kane moved down the row, checking each soldier's gear personally. "Check your rations. Make sure your comms are secure. We won't have time to fix mistakes once we're inside enemy territory." Jorath nodded nervously. Cyrenia gave a calm, short reply. The twins responded with confident grins. Cole simply said, "Understood, sir." When Kane reached the cockpit, the pilot, a quiet alien named Drella, glanced over her shoulder. "Entering the Cathar border in 2 hours. No patrols detected yet." "They'll be there," Kane said. "They always are." As the hours passed, Kane reviewed the plan in his mind. He had been on missions like this before, missions everyone else thought were impossible. He had learned long ago that the key was not perfection, but adaptation. Plans changed the moment the first shot was fired. When the warning light flashed in the cockpit, Kane was already on his feet. "Patrol ships," Drella said, her voice tight. "2 of them, closing fast." "Keep speed steady," Kane ordered. "Don't run. Let them think we're a lost supply ship. If they scan us, we'll deal with it then." The team waited in tense silence as the patrol ships drew closer. The hum of the engines seemed louder now, filling the small transport. After several long minutes, the radar blips began to fade. The patrols had passed without scanning. Only then did Kane return to his seat. "Lesson 1, he said to the team. "Sometimes the best way to win is to let the enemy believe you're not worth their time." The recruits listened, each storing the words away. Hours later, the fortress world came into view, a massive planet covered in jagged mountain ranges and dark seas. Above it shimmered the faint curve of the planetary shield, a wall of energy protecting everything below. Even from orbit, the fortress itself was visible, built into the side of a colossal cliff, its towers armed with heavy weapons. Sirenia spoke, softly, almost to herself. "It looks impossible." Kane studied it for a long moment. "That's the best kind of mission," he said quietly. "When the enemy thinks it's impossible, they stop looking for the one way in." The transport descended into the shadows of the mountains, heading for the narrow canyon Kane had chosen. The time for doubts was over. They were inside enemy space now, and there was no turning back. The transport touched down in the shadow of a jagged cliff. The light of the fortress world's sun was blocked by the towering rock walls, casting the landing site in deep shade. The air outside was cold and dry, carrying the faint smell of metal and stone. Kane stepped out first, his boots sinking into fine dust. He scanned the landscape, sharp ridges, narrow paths, and a winding canyon that disappeared into darkness. Somewhere beyond that darkness lay the old service tunnels that would take them under the mountains and closer to the shield generator. The rest of the team followed, their boots crunching quietly on the rocky ground. No one spoke. Even the twins, usually quick with jokes, stayed silent. The sense of danger was heavy in the air. "Stay close," Kane said softly. "No lights unless I say. Keep weapons ready, but don't fire unless we have no choice." They began their march into the canyon. The walls rose higher on both sides, blocking the sky until only a narrow strip of pale light remained above. Their shadows stretched long and thin along the stone. An hour into the march, Kane raised a hand. The team stopped instantly. Up ahead, faint in the distance, was the sound of shifting rocks. Kane crouched low, signaling the others to do the same. Slowly, he moved forward, every step placed with care to avoid loose stones. Peering around a bend, he saw them, a small Cathar. Scout team. 3 alien soldiers in dark armor, their weapons slung casually, were walking along the canyon floor. They didn't seem alert, but Kane knew better than to underestimate them. He backed away quietly and returned to the team. 3 scouts ahead. We wait until they pass." The minutes stretched on. The sound of boots and voices grew louder, then faded again as the scouts moved past without noticing them. Only when the last echo disappeared did Kane signal for the team to continue. The canyon narrowed further, forcing them to walk single file. The walls here were scarred with old blast marks, signs of some forgotten battle long ago. Kane ran his hand lightly over the marks as they passed. They fought. "Hard here once," he said quietly, almost to himself, "and they lost." Jorath, marching just behind him, asked, "How do you know they lost?" Kane glanced back, a faint half-smile on his face. "Because we're standing in their graveyard." Jorath swallowed hard and said nothing more. At last, they reached the entrance to the service tunnels, a rusted metal hatch half buried under rocks. The hinges were frozen, but Kane knelt and began working them without a sound. He pulled a small tool from his belt, pressing it into the lock. With slow, careful movements. "Why not just blast it open?" Thorek whispered. Kane didn't look up. "Because sound travels, and the Cathar have ears like predators." With a quiet click, the hatch swung open. A rush of stale air escaped, carrying the smell of dust and metal. Kane switched on a small wrist light, the only glow allowed, and led the way inside. The tunnels were narrow and uneven, the walls lined with old pipes and cables. In places, the ceiling had partially collapsed, forcing them to crouch and squeeze through. Their footsteps echoed faintly, despite their efforts to stay quiet. Kane moved with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime in such places. He scanned, the shadows, eyes always moving, noting every sound, the drip of water, the distant creak of metal. At one point, Serenia stumbled on a loose stone. Before she could fall, Kane caught her arm, steadying her. His grip was firm, but brief. "Watch the floor," he murmured. "The tunnel won't forgive you twice." They continued for hours, winding deeper under the mountains. The air grew colder, and a thin mist began to cling to the walls. Suddenly, Kane stopped again. He knelt, brushing dust away from the floor to reveal a small metallic plate with tiny holes. "Trap," he whispered. The twins leaned over to look. "What kind?" Renell asked. Kane studied it for a moment, then reached into his pack for a thin metal rod. Gently, he probed the holes until something inside clicked softly. With slow precision, he slid the plate aside to reveal a thin tripwire, connected to a set of charges hidden in the wall. "Pressure and trip combined," Kane explained. "Step here, and the tunnel collapses." Jorath stared in disbelief. "How did you even see that?" Kane's reply was simple. "I've seen them before, and I've stepped on one before." He disabled the mechanism quickly and motioned for them to move past. By the time they reached a wider chamber, the team was tired. They set down their packs and took a moment to rest, drinking water in silence. The chamber was quiet except for the soft hum of old machinery somewhere in the distance. Cole sat beside Kane. "Sir, how many times have you done this? Missions, like this, I mean." Kane's eyes were fixed on the dark tunnel ahead. "Enough times to know the mistakes that get you killed?" Cole hesitated, then asked, "And what's the biggest one?" Kane looked at him briefly. "Thinking you can't make mistakes. You can. We all can. The trick is making the kind you can survive." When they moved again, the tunnels began to slope upward. Faint vibrations could be felt through the floor now, the heartbeat of the fortress far above them. Kane's pace slowed. He motioned for silence and moved ahead alone, scouting the next bend. There, barely lit by dim maintenance lights, stood a pair of Cathar sentries. They were alert, scanning the tunnel with steady eyes. Kane studied their positions, the narrow space, and the cover available. He returned to the team. "2 guards ahead," he whispered. "We take them quiet. No shots." Rhinal and Thorek exchanged a glance, clearly eager, but Kane shook his head. "No rush. Wait for my signal." They waited in total silence as the guards shifted slightly, distracted by a distant sound from another corridor. Kane moved like a shadow, crossing the gap between them in moments. The fight was quick and silent. When the team followed, the sentries were gone, their weapons neatly stacked against the wall. As they moved past, Serenia looked at Kane. "You make it look easy." Kane's voice was low. "It's never easy. You just learn to move through the hard parts without stopping." The team followed him upward, the sound of machinery growing louder now. The end of the tunnel was near, and beyond it, the fortress itself. For the first time, Jorath felt something strange. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was a growing sense that the scarred human leading them might actually succeed, and that thought alone made the darkness ahead feel different. The tunnel ended in a large metal doorway. Faint light leaked through its edges, along with the low hum of machines. Kane stood at the front of the team, one hand pressed against the cold surface, feeling the vibrations. "Beyond this door," he whispered, "is the shield control chamber." The team exchanged tense glances. They all knew the importance of what lay ahead. Destroy the shield generator, and the Allied fleet could strike. Fail, and they would never leave this planet alive. Kane slowly pulled a small viewing device from his belt and slid it under the door. The image showed a huge chamber filled with thick cables, glowing power cores, and control consoles. But more importantly, it showed the defenders. Dozens of Cathar warriors stood in neat lines, their dark armor polished, their weapons gleaming. They were taller than any human, their helmets shaped like the heads of predators and their movements sharp and disciplined. Sirenia breathed out slowly. "There are too many." Kane didn't respond right away. His eyes studied every detail. The way the guards shifted, the position of the consoles, the paths between cover. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. "Stay behind me. No matter." "What?" The door opened with a deep hiss, and the storm began. The first Cathar warrior spotted them and shouted. The others turned instantly, weapons rising. Kane stepped forward before they could fire. His rifle barked once, dropping the first guard. Then he was moving, quick and deliberate, using the control consoles for cover. Every shot he fired found its mark, his movements so precise it seemed almost rehearsed. The team followed, firing when they could, but the Cathar numbers were overwhelming. The air filled with the sharp crack of energy fire, the heat of near misses burning against their armor. Kane didn't slow. He advanced steadily, forcing the enemy to react to him instead of the other way around. Two warriors charged from the side, their heavy boots pounding the floor. Kane met them head-on, his rifle swinging up like an extension of his arm. The first fell before it reached him. The second swung its weapon. Kane caught the shaft with one hand, twisting hard, and sent the warrior crashing into a power console, with a shower of sparks. Cole, seeing an enemy aiming for Kane's back, shouted, "Sir, left!" Kane pivoted instantly, firing before the Cathar could react. The shot hit true, and the enemy dropped. For the recruits, it was like watching a storm tear through the enemy lines. Every movement controlled, every decision exact. Still, the fight was far from easy. The Cathar adapted quickly, pushing from multiple angles. Jorath barely avoided a strike that would have cut him down, stumbling back as Renel pulled him to safety. Sirenia worked quickly, firing between bursts of covering fire, her calm voice steady as she called out enemy positions. 3. "On the right," she warned. "Taken care of," Kane replied a heartbeat later, his shots dropping them one by one. At last, they reached the central console, a massive control panel glowing with streams of alien code. The shield generator's core hummed. Nearby, encased in thick armored plating, Thorek knelt beside it, pulling explosives from his pack. 2 minutes, he said. Kane nodded. "We'll hold them." The Cathar realized what was happening and pressed forward with renewed fury. The team fought shoulder to shoulder now, each watching the other's back. Kane moved through them, constantly, firing from cover, striking with quick precision when the enemy got too close. Jorath, who had been afraid at the start, found himself fighting harder than ever, his fear replaced by something else. Trust. One Cathar captain broke, through larger and more heavily armored than the rest. Its weapons swung down toward Kane in a crushing arc. Kane sidestepped, the strike barely missing his head, and drove the butt of his rifle into the captain's midsection. The alien staggered but didn't fall. Kane's expression didn't change. He dropped his rifle, drew his sidearm, and fired twice at close range. The captain collapsed, armor sparking. Cole couldn't help but stare. "You've done this before." "More times than I can count," Kane said, reloading smoothly. 30 seconds, Thorek called. The Cathar numbers thinned, but their attacks grew desperate. One leaped toward Sirenia. Kane intercepted it mid-stride, slamming it back into a pillar. Another tried to flank them, only to be stopped by Reinel's sharp aim. The timer on the explosives hit its final moments. Kane gave the order. "Fall back!" They moved quickly toward the nearest exit tunnel. The enemy, realizing too late what was about to happen, surged forward. The explosion hit like a thunderclap. The floor shook violently, dust and debris raining from the ceiling. A blinding flash filled the chamber as the shield generator tore itself apart, the armored plating shattering under the force. Outside, far above the fortress world, the planetary shield flickered, then vanished. The way was open for the Allied fleet. The team didn't stop to celebrate. Kane kept them moving, knowing enemy reinforcements would arrive within minutes. As they reached a side tunnel, Sirenia glanced back. "They'll be coming after us with everything they have." Kane's voice was steady. "Good, let them. We've already taken what they can't get back." For the first time since the mission began, the team felt the weight of what they had just done. Against impossible odds, they had broken through, but the mission wasn't over. Now, they had to escape. And Kane knew the hardest part was still ahead. The side tunnel was narrow, the air thick with dust from the explosion. The team ran in single file, boots striking the metal floor in a steady rhythm. Somewhere behind them, alarms blared through the fortress, the sound sharp and urgent. Kane led the way, his steps quick but measured. Every so often he glanced back to make sure the others were close. He could already feel the vibrations in the floor. Enemy forces were moving fast to block their escape. They had destroyed the shield generator. The fleet would be able to strike now, but the Cathar wouldn't let them leave without a fight. "Sir, we've got movement behind us," Rhinell called, checking his tracker. "How far?" Kane asked without slowing. "Closing fast. More than a dozen." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Then we keep moving until we can't." They reached a junction where the tunnel split in two. Kane didn't hesitate. "Left," he ordered. "It'll take us closer to the landing point." Minutes later, they entered a wide maintenance chamber. The walls were lined with old machinery, some still humming faintly. At the far end, a large metal door blocked the exit. Thorek hurried forward and began working the controls. "Locked," he said, frowning. "It'll take a minute." "We don't have a minute," Cole said, glancing back the way they came. The sound of approaching boots grew louder. Shadows flickered in the tunnel behind them. Kane stepped forward, placing himself between his team and the enemy's approach. "Get that door open. I'll hold them." Jorath's eyes widened. "Sir, you can't." "I can," Kane said firmly. "And I will." The first Cathar soldiers appeared, weapons raised. Kane's rifle barked once, twice, each shot dropping a target. The rest spread out, trying to flank him, but he moved with sharp, practiced precision. The team worked quickly. Thorek's hands flew over the control panel. Sirenia crouched nearby to cover him, and Rhinell fired bursts down the tunnel whenever an enemy appeared, but more kept coming. A shot grazed Kane's side, burning through his armor. He staggered, but didn't fall. His face stayed calm, his eyes fixed on the enemy. He fired again, forcing them to keep their distance. Cole stepped up beside him. "Sir, let me—" "No," Kane said sharply. "Your job is to get out of here. Mine is to make—" "Sure you can." The door controls finally gave way with a heavy click. "It's open!" Thorek shouted. "Go!" Kane ordered. The team hesitated, but Kane's voice left no room for argument. "Move!" They ran through the doorway, Sirenia glancing back one last time. Kane was still there, firing, his figure lit by the flashes of energy weapons. On the other side, the corridor sloped upward toward the surface. The sound of the battle behind them grew fainter with each step, but none of them felt at ease. Cole slowed for a moment, looking back. "He's not coming." Rhinell gritted his teeth. "He told us to go. But we can't just—" Sirenia cut him off, her voice tight. "If we go back, we'll waste his sacrifice. He knows what he's doing." Back in the maintenance chamber, Kane's rifle clicked empty. Without hesitation, he drew his sidearm and kept firing. The enemy was close now, too close for comfort. But every time they tried to push forward, they met his fire. His wound ached, the burn spreading through his side, but he ignored it. He had made his choice when he stepped into this room. If they wanted his team, they would have to go through him first. Finally, the Cathar pulled back, regrouping for a final charge. Kane leaned against the wall, breathing hard, his sidearm nearly out of ammunition. He looked toward the now empty doorway where his team had escaped. A faint smile crossed his face. "They'll make it," he murmured to himself. The enemy roared and surged forward. Kane gripped his weapon tighter and stepped out to meet them. Up above, the team reached the landing site. Their transport was already powered on, engines humming, ready to lift off. "Get us out of here!" Rhinell shouted to the pilot. The transport rose into the air, the rocky terrain falling away beneath them. Sirenia sat silently, her hands clenched around her medical kit. Jorath stared at the floor, not speaking. Cole stood by the viewport, looking down at the fortress. He searched for any sign of Kane. There was none. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, the Allied fleet appeared ahead, their massive ships already moving into attack formation. The destruction of the shield had opened the way. The mission was a success, but it didn't feel like one. Cole finally turned from the viewport, his voice low. "We wouldn't be here without him," Sirenia nodded. "And the fleet wouldn't be here either." They sat in silence as the stars stretched into lines, the transport jumping to faster-than-light speed. Far below, the fortress was under heavy bombardment. Kane's fate was unknown, lost in the chaos of battle. But for the team, one truth was clear. He had given them a future, and that was the price he had been willing to pay. The Allied fleet's victory over the fortress world was swift once the shield fell. Giant warships rained precise fire upon the Cathar defenses, tearing apart weapons platforms and silencing their cannons. Within hours, the planet's surface was littered with smoking ruins. In the War Council's Grand Chamber, reports poured in. The shield was gone, the enemy's command was broken, and the Allied troops were pushing forward on every front. But when Captain Rian Varric stepped forward to deliver his report, there was no celebration in his voice. "The mission succeeded," he said. "The shield generator was destroyed. The fleet has the planet. But—" He paused, his eyes hard. Commander Elias Kane did not return. The room grew silent. Even those who had laughed at Kane in the beginning now lowered their heads. They had expected failure, but instead, he had delivered victory at a cost none of them had been willing to pay. On board the transport, Kane's team sat in the mess hall, the hum of the engines steady around them. None of them spoke for a long time. The mission was over, but the weight of it stayed with them. Jorath broke the silence first. "I didn't think we'd make it. Not after what I saw in that chamber, but he didn't stop." Sirenia nodded slowly. "He gave us more than orders. He gave us the belief that we could keep going, no matter how bad it got." Rhinell leaned back in his seat, staring at the ceiling. "I've fought beside a lot of good soldiers, but none like him." Cole didn't say anything. He was holding something, Kane's old combat knife. Kane had pressed it into his hand just before they split up, saying only, "You'll know when to use it." Cole wasn't sure yet what that meant, but he knew he would keep it for the rest of his life. Weeks passed. The Allied forces pushed deeper into Cathar space, using the momentum Kane's mission had given them. His name began to spread quietly among the soldiers, first as a story told by his team, then as a rumor passed in barracks and mess halls. They told of a scarred human who had walked into an impossible mission and come out with the enemy's most guarded secret shattered. They spoke of how he had stood alone so his team could escape. The stories grew. Some said he fought until the entire enemy squad fell. Others claimed he was last seen walking deeper into the fortress, taking the fight to them even as the walls burned around him. No one knew for certain what had happened in those final minutes, but every version of the story ended the same way, with Kane refusing to run. One evening, in an Allied training camp on a distant moon, a group of young recruits sat around a table in the mess hall. "Is it true?" one asked, wide-eyed. Did Kane really take down an entire squad by himself? An older soldier at the next table overheard. He turned, his expression serious. "It's true enough," he said. But the important part isn't how many he took down. It's why he stayed. He could have left with his team. He didn't. The recruits listened closely. The soldier leaned forward. You want to know what made Kane dangerous? It wasn't his scars. It wasn't his aim. It was that he never stopped. No matter how bad it got, no matter how many were against him, he kept moving forward. And that's something you can't teach. It's something you decide. Back on Earth, word of Kane's mission reached the military academies. In one lecture hall, an instructor played a recording from the transport's debriefing. It was Kane's voice, captured during the briefing to his team before the mission. Everything is a trap, he had told them. The trick is walking into one in a way that makes it yours. The instructor paused the recording. Remember that. This is now part of your training, the Kane principle. Adapt, endure, and never let the enemy control the fight. From that day forward, cadets learned not just tactics, but the story of the man behind them. Months later, Captain Varick stood at the edge of a memorial wall carved into the rock of an Allied outpost. It was a simple wall, covered in names of those who had not returned from their missions. Varick placed a hand on one freshly etched name. Commander Elias Kane. You were right, Varick murmured. They didn't see you coming. And now, they'll never forget you. A soft wind moved through the canyon below, carrying the distant sounds of soldiers training, shouting commands, boots striking the ground in unison. Kane's spirit seemed to linger there, in every voice that refused to quit. Among the soldiers, a quiet tradition began. Before setting out on dangerous missions, some would touch the scars on their armor, real or painted, and whisper a simple promise. I'll keep moving forward. It was not a regulation. No commander ordered it. But it spread all the same. In time, the enemy learned the name too. Cathar soldiers spoke in hushed tones of the human with scars who had faced them without fear. They called him the One Who Stood, a title meant to warn their own, but which only made the legend grow among humans and allies alike. One cycle later, Cole returned to Earth for the first time since the mission. He visited a quiet spot overlooking a valley, a place Kane had once mentioned during a long night in the tunnels. Cole stood there for a long while, the combat knife still clipped to his belt. He didn't know if Kane was truly gone or if, somewhere out there, he was still walking forward into the next impossible fight. But he did know this. Kane had changed them all. And as Cole turned to leave, he said the words softly to himself, a promise he intended to keep. I'll keep moving forward.